My name is Jerusha Ignacio. I am from a small community called Ojo Encino, New Mexico, which is right outside the Navajo Reservation. And I came to Naka because I heard that they were hiring for a kindergarten teacher and they were just starting a new school. So I was like, I want to be part of that. And it sounded really interesting. The more I read about Naka and especially its vision and mission statements, and it kind of went with my philosophy as a teacher. So that's how I jumped on board.
My name is Leslie Richard, and I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri, but I was also raised in Switzerland, so I have dual citizenship. I've been teaching in Albuquerque for 18 years, and the past couple of years I was teaching in Turkey. While I was living in Turkey and preparing to come back to Albuquerque, I was looking for positions and saw that Naka had an opening. And I read up on Naka a little bit, and I talked to my sister-in-law who also works here and thought this would be a good place for me. I think it would be exciting and something new, interesting, a place where I could learn. And that is how it's turned out to be. So that's why I'm here, teaching first grade. Well, we've planned it together. So when we first started working with the core values, it was a lot for us to wrap our heads around. We understand core curriculum, and we needed to think of how the core values and the core curriculum worked together. So at first we were working on ways to plan around the core values, and then we started understanding that the core values are in everything that the kids do. And so we created a framework.
Yeah, so we sort of sat down together and started thinking about all the different topics we wanted to teach and how we can thread the core values into it. And so it took one afternoon for us just to sit down and really think about what we wanted to do, what we wanted to teach. And then the more we talked about it, I think it just started coming together naturally after we were able to wrap our heads around what we wanted.
And so the core values in our curriculum, we have units of study, and each of those units of study will focus on topics. As an example, we've been studying biomes. So kindergarten is talking about rainforest biome, and first grade is talking about deciduous forests. And in this, we talk a lot about respect, and we're getting the kids to think about how we respect Mother Earth, what it means to show respect.
And then I think also the other thing when we're planning all this, the framework, was also thinking about a lot of the children's books that were written by Indigenous authors and how we can actually pull those in and use them sort of like mentor text throughout the unit. So that was the other piece that we did together.
The core values that we talk about on a daily basis are respect, responsibility,
perseverance, community, reflection. So those are the sort of the core values that we touch up on throughout the day.
And throughout the day, well, in first grade, we reflect on what happened in all of our lessons. So as an example, in the morning we have literacy, and we work on our literacy curriculum. And then after we do something like centers, we sort of touch back. We, as the kids put it, flashback to what happened. And they talk about things that they thought were interesting. They talk about what they picked up during that lesson. So it's really a way to think back and become a reflective person to process the information that you're getting during that time.
I think for kindergarten, we do a lot of the core values of respect and responsibility. So we talk about that a lot since we're like 5 years old, and we're working on taking care of our materials and things, learning to put things away. So we use that with every center activity that we do with the kids. And then in the morning with our reading program, it's very interesting that some of our units connect with our core value topics that we talk about in the afternoon. So that's also the cool part. We're talking about core values throughout the day, not just during core value time. So I know that with Wanderers for kindergarten, they kind of connect to, our core values in the afternoon, but not so much first, I think.
Not as much for first grade. So we have to create the connection, but it's not that hard to do. And in terms of the framework for our units of study, an example of something that we've done, we did a unit on community, and we had one of the high school students write a trickster tale for us in the form of a script. And so the kids put on a play, and the parents came and they performed it, and it was all about community and working together, and everybody had to bring a can of food in order to gain entry into the performance, and we delivered that to the Roadrunner Food Bank. So that's an example of community and community service that the kids do on a regular basis.
I think the other cool thing about NACA and our grades is we have literacy nights once a month, and we're able to meet with the families and also explain to them what the core values are, and then try to include them during those nights as well with the activities that we're doing, and we try to connect them to the topics that we're teaching within our core values framework.
I think the visit that had the most impact on my students were teachers from North Dakota, and they were from NACA-inspired schools. They came and they told stories to the kids and gave them, I think that sense of community that I can't necessarily provide as a non-native person, and they were really excellent about having the storytelling. They drummed, they danced, and the kids really took an interest in it.
We had a group of high school students, I believe from the Zuni class, that came in and shared, the Zuni language with my kids here. And it was very interesting because I have a Zuni student in here, and she, just to see her making that connection with the kids, and she's like, oh, that's my language, and her being able to self-identify with the kids from that class, it was very cool to see. And I think that's what we try to do within our core values, have the kids self-identify their own tribe or group that they're from. So that was neat to see.
In our when we're working on core values, it is a really important part of it for the kids to bring in their stories. And they are, as kindergarten and first graders, they're learning their stories. And so sometimes their homework assignment might be to go home and to talk to your parents about your tribe, to talk about this tradition that you shared with us, to give us more information. And I think they're becoming, you can see it, they're really proud of where they come from. So seeing that through their stories is really, I think, the best part of NACA, actually.
Yeah, I think them bringing the stories from home is awesome. I know that when we read Louis Tiwanima, that story, he gets sent to boarding school as a young child, and the kids were really affected by it. And they actually went home and talked to their families about it. And I had the majority of the students came back and actually shared stories of, their grandparents or aunts and uncles that were also shipped off to boarding school. So it was neat to see them make that connection with the story. And needless to say, Louis Tiwanima was pretty famous in this classroom for a couple of months there. And everyone wanted to take the book home and share it with family. So I think that's the neat part with our core values curriculum here, is to see kids being able to connect with a lot of these stories.
Yeah. The core values books definitely are the larger presence in our classroom. And we were just reading the words of Chief Seattle in a book called Brother Eagle, Sister Sky. And they wanted me to write the quote, "We belong to the earth. The earth does not belong to us." And so they're referencing it constantly when we're talking about the rainforest and the deciduous forest. It's really...
Yeah, I was going to say that. I think our core value text really does that for us. Throughout the year, it seems like our kiddos are able to refer back to it. And they pick examples. They're like, oh, it's like, the two girls that were boasting and showing off from the rough-faced girl. And, they'll go into it. So it's nice that they can have like this anchor text to refer back to. And it kind of helps them understand new concepts that we're learning along the way. It's definitely important for us to have those books there for them. Yeah,
pull out.
Exactly.
And re-reference.
Yeah,
and
they love hearing them again too. The kids and I read the story, The Rough-Faced Girl. I chose that book to help the kids understand the core value perseverance and also respect. And there's a lot of examples of that in that story. So it's a Native American version of the Cinderella story. I didn't bring the Cinderella story up, at all at the beginning, but it was interesting after we studied it and read it for a while. They themselves were like, oh, it's like the Cinderella story. So it's interesting that they made that connection on their own, but I didn't want to pull that in the forefront myself. Within that story, too, the cool thing was we learned a lot about the culture, too. They didn't live in teepees. They live in a different house structure. So we got into learning about, the houses they lived in. We looked at the map and saw where the story was actually coming from. So with a lot of these, I think, core value books, you're able to cover a lot of things from one text. It was... even though we chose a lot of these texts to focus on one core value, just naturally talking about it and studying it throughout the unit, you're able to pull different examples from it. So I think that's the cool part about what we do here.
So our students here at NACA get to hear stories from Native American authors, and they see some of the stories that they've been hearing from their families. And I think that it's important for them to understand that in terms of their heritage, living here in Albuquerque, they're very, they are kind of shifting worlds sometimes. And I think it's interesting for them to hear the stories of other people who are doing that same thing. They always ask, is that a true story? They're always asking that. And we always say, yeah, that's a true story. And we're trying to get them to see that we respect each other's stories, because there are many stories in one classroom and many cultures in a kindergarten classroom and in a first grade classroom. So what we want them to understand is that we respect each other's heritage, we respect each other's cultural values, and so they're meaningful to all of us because they're meaningful to a person or some people. So I think this is what makes NACA different in a lot of ways, is that we're recognizing these children and their cultural heritage.
Yeah. And I think, we've come a long way with what the core values curriculum should look like. I think from the beginning we struggled with, how is this going to look? How are we going to put it all together? And how do we get 5, 6, and 7-year-olds to understand these huge concepts like perseverance and respect, community, culture? How do we begin to even wrap our brains around that? And so from the beginning, we struggled with it a lot. Just, we tried to focus on one core value at a time, and we quickly realized that we can't isolate the core value by itself. So then, we then finally got together and started really looking at it, and we're like, oh, this is how we should do it. And, let's focus on a certain science or social studies topic, and then what can we thread in with that. So that's where the framework came from.
That's been an important part of this journey for the two of us.
Yeah.
NACA provides opportunities for professional development, and we really wanted to sit down and make plans. And so we were able to do this because we put our heads together, and it was definitely a collaborative.
Yeah, because once we had, the ideas going, and we kind of had an idea of what we wanted it to look like, it literally took us like 2 hours, 3 hours just to get it together. The entire framework for the entire year came out in 2 or 3 hours. We wanted it, the science and social studies topics, because we feel that that's sort of missing from everyday school curriculum. So it's nice that we could tie that in with our core values. What I hope for with my students is that they understand where they come from, and they learn who they are, and also that they're capable of becoming awesome people after they leave school here. I want them to go forward in life with having all these core values with them. I want them to always persevere. I want them to always come back or take a step back and reflect on their lives, their work, their culture if they need to, and then also to self-identify themselves, who they are, and then just to be proud of where they come from, who they are. And I think that's really what I want for my students here.
My hope for my students is that they maintain this strong voice that they're developing, and that they become leaders or continue to be leaders in their classrooms, in their communities, and hold on to that inner strength that I think that they're developing.